Joe Pulizzi is an entrepreneur, speaker, author, and one of the top leading marketers in the world of content marketing, where he's also known as the godfather of content marketing. He has founded and led 4 companies, including the Content Marketing Institute, the leading global content marketing education and training organization, teaching enterprise brands how to attract and retain customers through compelling multi-channel storytelling. Joe's most recent business is The Tilt, a newsletter turning content creators into content entrepreneurs. Joe is the author of 6 books, including Epic Content Marketing, Killing Marketing, and most recently the 2nd edition of Content Inc., dedicated to entrepreneurs, a go-to guide to building a business by establishing a loyal audience before you sell any products or services. His podcast, This Old Marketing, hosted by him and Robert Rose, has been downloaded over 2 million times in 150 countries. Joe is also the co-founders with his wife Pam of the Orange FX Foundation, created to make sure children with speech disorders receive the speech therapy and technology they need. Joe is my guest at Marketing Leaders. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Marketing Leaders. My guest today is the content marketing superstar, my godfather. I'm going to say it very selfishly, Joe Pulizzi, who literally with his first book changed my life, probably change yours also if you're listening to this. And he's here for us with the 2nd edition of Epic Content Marketing. And I'm not gonna ask him to introduce himself, but just to say hi and let's do this. Hi, Joe. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you are so sweet. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. And it's been almost 10 years we've known each other, because you reached out after the first book and we talked, and here we are in 23 talking about the same things. And you'd think we wouldn't have to do another version of it, but there's still enough need out there where people need to understand the basics and how to do a documented content marketing strategy, and why building an audience is so important for businesses. So when we got into, March, April, May of 20, you had such a flux of content. I mean, more content than we've ever seen at one time coming online, because everybody was doing everything on the internet. And you had a lot of really bad practices and people just throwing things against the wall, and some things worked, most of it didn't. And I started to, when I actually rewrote Content Inc., my other book, during that time before we got into Epic Content Marketing. And I was like, oh my God, there's so many people, businesses and individuals doing this content thing, and they have no idea how to create a strategy around it. And it was a little disheartening. I mean, I've been in this business for 25 years trying to evangelize, look, there's a right way to do this. There's many different ways to do it and to be successful, but there is a process that we know works now, because we have the case studies and we've done the research around it. And COVID was a little bit of a downer, honestly, when it comes to seeing the types of social media content practices, especially for businesses, that I'm shaking my head. I'm like, what are you doing? You're just throwing content everywhere, expecting it to work. And that's basically what honestly happens in most companies, as you know. It's just like, okay, well, we can do all the things, so let's just do all the things. Let's just throw it all out there and see what happens. And you become mediocre at best at TikTok and YouTube and podcasts and e-newsletters and blogs and whatever. So, okay, there's a lot of stuff out there, and businesses have come to believe that more is better. Well, more is not better. And as my friend Robert Rose always says, our job is not to create more content. It's actually to create the minimum amount of content for the maximum amount of results. And somewhere along the line, we lost that. And I think COVID was one of those times. We got a lot of time at home. We're not going into work. We're going to put on the afterburners and just create all sorts of stuff. And more stuff isn't necessarily better, is what we learned.
I was thinking at the time there was a need to pitch for content marketing. So he had to call it like, this is marketing through content. But now that almost everybody has understand that content marketing is like compulsory. I feel that we're not talking about it anymore. We're more talking about, okay, what is going to be my strategy with content now that I'm convinced? What do you think? Do you see this switch also from one to another, or it's just like wording?
Uh, I think it depends on how you look at it. To your point, I think that content marketing to a lot of people means the creation and distribution of content. And when you bring in the word strategy, you're actually, what strategy to me means is that you start saying no to things. And that's where I think content marketing has gone wrong, because content marketing is, oh, we say yes to everything. We're going to be in all the channels, as we just talked about before. But if you say content marketing strategy, content strategy is a whole different thing in and of itself. Gets into governance, gets into all sorts of things that we don't talk about with content marketing. You talk about content marketing strategy, and you say, oh, how do I effectively build an audience that knows, likes, and trusts me, that if we do this the right way, we'll see some kind of behavior change. That means that you have to say no to a lot. You have to say, I don't know if we should be doing the podcast right now. It's not a good idea for us to create a content program on LinkedIn or whatever. I'm just throwing things out there, but you have to be very specific. So if you're somebody new listening to this, and you say, okay, well, all right, I'm doing content. We're all doing content marketing in some way, but what kind of a strategy? You'd say, okay, well, first of all, you get a very particular audience. Most businesses, at least in B2B, they have 8 or 9 or more audiences. We're just talking about one. So pick one specific audience. And then the second thing is, how are you going to be differentiated? We call this in the book, what's your content tilt? What is that area? Are you going to create content that's like everyone else in your industry? And that's what tends to happen. There's a little bit of differences here. You have platform differences, but generally, when you look at industry-wide content, it's essentially the same. That's a huge problem. And then you say, okay, well, 1, 2, my differentiation area. And then 3 is, you should be focusing on one core area content type. Is it audio, video, or texture plus image? Get amazing at one of those things. And then number 4, pick a platform. You should have a home base. What is that a blog? Is it a newsletter? Is it a podcast? Is it a YouTube channel? What is that? Those 4 things, you're very patient. You distribute consistently. You do the right things about content that we talk about in the book from a strategic standpoint, content optimization, and a commenting strategy, an influencer strategy, if you will. And I believe you'll be successful. How many companies actually do that? Less than 10%, way less than 10%, maybe way less than 5%. And that's what's frustrating. And it's and maybe it's because we brought up with this idea that advertising was king. We're like, oh, really? It's just about interruption and talking about products and services. And then all of a sudden, content was democratized. We could do all the things that media companies were doing, but we never learned, oh, this is the way you build a media company. This is how you build content. This is how you build content assets. We were never taught that. And it's still prolific when it comes to marketers. I found that most marketers, seemingly from their educational standpoint, are stuck in what we were taught 20, 30 years ago. And we're just not thinking about building value. I think so. I mean, I hang around with a lot of really, really smart people that totally get it. And I'm in awe. And I think, oh, everybody gets it. I don't have to talk about content marketing anymore. And then when you really go out and I do a speech somewhere and I answer questions and talk to people afterwards, I realize that the majority of the people don't get this, or they get it and can't sell it inside their organization.
Okay. Very curious to just very quickly, you make a difference between content marketing strategy and content strategy. Not the same thing for you.
Not the same thing at all. No. I mean, if you talk to somebody like a Christina Halverson over at Brain Traffic and a Margot Bloomstein and some really amazing thought leaders about content strategy, those are very different things, in my opinion, than because they're talking about how an enterprise works content in and out. It has a lot to do with user experience and UX. And there's things that, I mean, they're very, very smart people, much smarter than I am. A lot of that is about the inner workings of how content needs to be used in order for the enterprise to be successful, not content marketing. Like when you say content strategy, that's not a small business discussion. That's a larger enterprise discussion, in my opinion. So I mean, We can get into the semantics of it. Some people might disagree, but if you talk to people in the content strategy camp, they will look at content marketing as a completely different thing. And honestly, not a lot of marketing in content strategy. They're really talking about how do we put the pins in the holes and make things work and functionally get the website working and talking with all the people that need to deploy assets into that. If I'm talking about content marketing, I'm never bringing up any of that with a marketer because they're not involved in any of that stuff. So it is different to me.
Okay, but content strategy, is true that it involves content that can be put offline also, not only online. It's the whole brand content at large that stood for the brand outside and inside the web. Okay, that's interesting. I've been interviewing some others, professional in the industry, and some are not making it any different. They think it's just jargon, and they said that it's not a big deal. So it's very interesting, but maybe there is a point here to educate a little bit more and to be more specific on that.
It probably need to. I mean, I went through about 5 years of going to content strategy conferences, no marketing, just content strategy. And these are people that did not have a background in any type of marketing at all, and really looked at content marketing as something with two heads. They didn't want to mix it at all. We've seen some mixture of it, but I think that if you, let's say, for example, if you're a marketer and you are going to work at a Progressive Insurance or a United Airlines, and you're hired as a content strategy role, that is not a marketing job. It is absolutely not. It is probably not in the market. It's probably in IT is where it probably lives, because it's all, they're trying to make sense of the website itself. So it is a much different field to me.
I want to talk about, of course, what is epic content marketing and epic content specifically. So you explained very well that one of the things that prevent us to create epic content is one of the criteria. There is many, so I just picked one: setting the bar too low. And I will quote you on that. Your content marketing should be the best in your industry, better than all your competitors. How can you be the trusted expert in your industry if it is not? I have few questions about this sentence generally. First, isn't it putting a lot of pressure on marketers on its own that we have to be the best, considering the ocean of content, as you explained? And is it simply doable?
I love the question. And I want people to say, can this content strategy, content marketing, be the best of breed, be the best thing for our audiences? And if you answer that question no, or you laugh at it like, there's no way that we could do that, then I believe you're not niche enough. That's why I want you to keep asking that question. Because if you say, okay, we want to be the leading expert in the cloud computing area for IT professionals, that's very broad. It's almost impossible to do that. You know, Microsoft and Salesforce and Oracle and IBM, they're all trying to do it. They're all trying to do that exact same thing with billions of dollars behind them. So are you going to do that? Probably not. So you have to niche it down to a point where you can get there. You have to focus on, can we get a smaller audience base? Can we focus on a differentiation area that's not cloud compute? I don't know. Just keep going deeper and deeper until you find that group of people that says, yes, if we talk about this thing consistently to that group of people, we can be the leading resource. So I think it's absolutely possible. But more than that, it's a little audacious, just fine. But I think that the core is ask the questions so you can actually make an impact on the behavior change of that group of people. Most marketers come at something and say, I want more. I want a wider audience. And that's a mistake, because it's almost always you have to water down your content to make it relevant to a wider audience. So I want the smallest possible audience. There's an example I used, I think, in the last book about people that like to track, it's like we're talking, how do you create content for the pet supplies industry? And we got it down to the point where, well, what if you were targeting people that like to travel with their pets in recreational vehicles? You probably remember that one, right? I'm like, okay, that's something we can do. That's very specific. If we created a content plan blog or e-newsletter or podcast or whatever, we could be the resource that those people wake up to and say, I've got to listen to, interact with, engage with that content. So that's kind of what I'm talking about from there. Because if you don't do that, you become clutter, I believe. You will settle and say, this is good enough. And good enough will not get opened. It will not get shared. It will probably get you fired or laid off, just to be honest. It's too much competition out there.
Would those ideas could be relevant to find a content niche? Would, for example, a short, very short format, very very short written content could be a differentiating factor?
Sure.
Would go local, for example, just saying another example very quickly, let's say you're writing content about vegan meat. There is tons of writers who are writing about this, but maybe not writing about vegan meat in Miami Beach or something. Would that be something that could also help to find a differentiating factor? I'm sorry.
Absolutely. Those are all good examples. I would always take it to the next level and bring in a location, a region, a different type of audience. You could say, you and I were talking about marathon running before. You could say vegan meat for marathon runners in the Northeast of the United States. Anything that you can do to differentiate. And by the way, I mean, a good example just about differentiating in a different form is John Lee Dumas. I mean, John Lee Dumas started a daily podcast for entrepreneurs. When he started that, there were many podcasts for entrepreneurs, and there's a ton of information out there for entrepreneurs that want to grow. He said, who's not doing a daily? Nobody was doing a daily podcast. So that was his form of differentiation and say, okay, yes, is it the same? But I'm going to deliver it differently. So yes, there's a different, so you could do it by region, you could do it by topic, you could do it by audience, but you can also do it by form. So just some ways to think about it.
So one way also, and it's a straight question, do you think that merging personal branding and content niching down could be a good idea? Here's the thing I have in mind. Yep. Let's say I'm doing content marketing like tons of women out there. But I'm also a mom. I'm also having 3 boys with ADHD. I'm also run a marathon. Could that be something at some point used in my content to differentiate myself and try to merge on a professional side?
So basically you're saying if you were creating content as a marketer for a business, would that be an asset? It absolutely could.
Okay.
I have to say it depends, because it really does depend on what the overall goal is for the organization when it comes to your content creation. So you always have to put that out there. Sure. But if you're saying that people want to interact with other human beings, just look at, I'm very active on LinkedIn. Do the businesses or the individuals get more traction? Always the individuals. It's not even close. So if you're an individual doing things for the brand, it's always better. And of course you want to be personal. The personal posts sometimes get the best interaction, are the ones they learn from the most. So if you can bring in your personal experience for whatever you're doing, that's great. The issue is a lot of companies don't want that. They have a brand story they want to tell. They want to tell it in this fashion. Here's your guidebook, exactly how you, now that's, hopefully that's going away in a lot of cases, where the company will say, all right, we have 4 or 5 or 10 content creators. We want you to be you. Here's what we want to talk about, but use your examples, your struggles, those types of things, so you can build your own audience as part of this brand. Very, very important, very powerful. I think IBM was probably the first one to really lean into that about 10 years ago. They've gone back and forth on it and said, this is okay. You can really show yourself as part of our content. And I think if you're an organization, you should lean into that. And a lot of them don't. Now, for an individual content creator, absolutely. The only thing that I would say is have a secondary content brand. Like if it's you and you're doing this whole thing, it's not your name. You have a separate content brand name, like a company name as part of that, so that
Okay.
you're building an outside asset. But absolutely, I agree with that.
Okay, so that would mean that employee advocacy, I feel that that's how they call personal branding for a larger company, could be a good idea. Do you think that, for example, Michael Brenner at the time for Salesforce was doing this a little bit, or?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Michael was great because, yeah, Michael's working for SAP. He's VP of content marketing, and he's going out there doing his own thing. He's building a speaking career, and all those things were helping SAP because he was telling SAP's story, but he was doing it as Michael Brenner. The more, I mean,
That's
if
the
you,
point. That's exactly
well,
right.
if you're just, let's say that you have a very disjointed content marketing strategy, which a lot of companies do. If you say, okay, well, where's our expertise? Our expertise is in our employees.
Mhm.
Well, how can we give them, how can we help them tell our story? Let them do their thing. Let them do their speaking. Let them create their blogs. Give them time during the work hours to build their own personal brands. I believe that for salespeople, like that's critical. Like if you are a salesperson, you should be building your own expertise as part of, let's say, LinkedIn or your own newsletter. And if that's done right, and the company that you work for appreciates that and shepherds that, that will help the company's sales. Absolutely.
I
So you
think
just can't be scared of them. A lot of companies say, oh, they might leave. They might leave. Yes. But if you let them do all these things and they're happy and you're paying them well, then they'll stay. Well, so let's say that we're sending out the Tilt newsletter every Tuesday and Friday, and you stop opening them because you're saying we're sending it out too consistently and it's just too much. Well, then we've got if that's the case, we've got a content problem. Morning Brew is a good example. Morning Brew is a daily newsletter.
Yeah.
And if you don't open Morning Brew, it shouldn't be because, oh my God, I'm getting too many Morning Brews. That's what it is. It's a daily, just like a daily newspaper. It's because there's something it's not delivering on your needs or expectations. And that's the problem. So I always, I get this question all the time. It's like, isn't it, no, if I send a daily email or even a weekly podcast, it's just too much for people. They can't engage in all that content. Well, first of all, we know that people can engage with a lot of content, about 4 or 5 hours a day, actually, on multiple devices. They can binge Netflix like it's going out of town, right? So those things can happen. So it is not the amount of content. It is that the content is not fulfilling something. So I would challenge and say it's never a consistency issue. Now, on the other hand, if you just stop delivering at some point, we had this problem with our This Old Marketing podcast. If you remember, this happened, whatever, a week ago or a couple of weeks ago. It didn't go out. We had a problem sending it. It didn't go out. And we got a bunch of people complaining that it didn't go out. Well, thankfully, we have an audience that wants to get it at a certain time, and that's great. But if we did that too many times, I could see people taking that time that they spend with us every Friday morning and replacing it with something else because we're sending it on Thursday or on Sunday, or we skip a week. And you lose that appointment and so, I mean, and I'm only going by what are the greatest media companies of all time and what they've done. They've created something valuable and sent it consistently over a long period of time. I don't know another way to do it. Do I like to surprise on occasion? Maybe a special edition of something. Those things I love because we want to surprise and delight. But I would probably say it's consistency always wins. And that's the thing. I mean, you have to be consistent over an 18, 24, 30 month period in order to build a trusting and loyal audience so that they will buy ultimately whatever you put in front of them. So it takes a long time to get there.
What you said is very true. It's like building an appointment with. So if you don't show up to the appointment, people are surprised. Where have you been? Okay.
Do that too many times and they're gonna be like, well, I can't count on this. It's just I had this happen yesterday. Somebody had a podcast interview with me, and the first time they scheduled it and then they canceled, and then yesterday they scheduled and canceled. Well, what happens? There's no third time. And it's nothing, I don't want to be mean about it, but I can't afford to schedule another one and keep doing this. So that's done. That happens the same thing with the content. You can do it one time maybe and get away with it. You do it a second time, they're probably gone forever. You've lost that audience member. I think you're moving away from, I think what you're saying, you're moving away from demographic and even some firmographic information where what we want it like for example, if you Creator Economy Expo is our event, and I initially made the wrong interpretation of what our persona was for that. I thought it was younger creators that are just getting started, mostly on social media platforms. Boy, was I wrong. You know who ended up coming to Creator Economy Expo? It was people aged, men and women between the ages of 30 and 55, generally second career, with some kind of an expertise area that they wanted to share out. And they were heavy in blogs and podcasts and newsletters. I'm like, oh my God, did I get that one wrong? So we had an initial hypothesis that we had to figure that was ultimately wrong. And that changed the entire direction of the tilt, because now we really focus a lot of it on what's your expertise area instead of maybe a food blog or travel blog. Even though we do cover that stuff, it has changed quite a bit. So I think we're also moving away, to your point, from, we don't just want to answer questions. 10 years ago, it was really about answering. Marcus Sheridan, of course, made this popular with River Pools and Spas. Just answer the questions. Who's your audience persona? Answer their questions and everything will be there. I think that if you do enough audience research, to your point, and start to understand the real pain points, you want to go beyond the questions. You almost want to anticipate. You want to go in different directions. I think that Paul Reitzer with Marketing AI Institute did this beautifully. He was 5 years on the AI content train before anybody was there. His audience was same as Content Marketing Institute, actually. They were basically an enterprise marketer, a marketer at a larger company. But he's like, I know they're not asking these questions yet, but these are the questions they need to be asking. And he's way early, and I'm looking at that business model and I'm like, oh man, Paul, because you want them to succeed. And now this year, everything falls into Paul's lap. Their registrations are going crazy. Their event this year is going to be a total sellout. I can see it happening. Was early. And that's what happens. Like, we were a little bit early in 2007 with content marketing. I mean, I was going to, as you know, I was giving up in 2009. I said, this is it. So sometimes you have to take that chance, but then when the audience finally realizes this, because you've been helping them think forward thinking for a long time, then you've got a great advantage. So by 2011, 2012, we were in the catbird seat because of the fact that you search for anything on content marketing. We were there because we've been talking about it for 5 years. So I don't know if I answered any of your question, but I think that it's moving away from just answering the questions for that particular persona to getting to know that person group, if you will, so well, you can go beyond what they're asking. I guess depending on your goal, the answer would be both. I mean, it's probably two separate things. It probably is. I mean, when we were doing, we had multiple personas when we launched Content Marketing Institute, and one of our personas were just the influencer group. And what are we going to? That's how the award, the Top Blogs program came to be, because that was a specific program just for influencers, that it was not for the core audience that we were going after at CMI. So I think that you would need to look at that group completely differently. Like we talked about Justin Welsh and commenting strategy. We talk about in the book this idea of an influencer hit list. That is a separate strategy. Yeah, ultimately that's a part of your content marketing strategy, but you need different content and different strategies to reach that group of people.
But that's my point.
I would look at it separately.
That's my point. And that's why, because sometimes it can make the content creation part very difficult, because let's say for example, you're doing, you're having a blog on digital marketing towards small business entrepreneurs, restaurants, for example. They usually don't know many things about content marketing. So everything you're going to write about content marketing will be necessarily something simple, basics, like something that is like understandable by someone who is not in that field. In terms of traffic, it's not going to lead you anywhere, because you're going to jump into the ocean of content marketing content. So at some point, how do you do the stretch between writing something absolutely outstanding that worth sharing by your influencers in the digital marketing space, and at the same time to your target audience that might buy from you.
Yeah, so that's a totally different content marketing strategy if that's what your goal
Okay.
is. Absolutely. So you have, if you have an audience, and by the way, I mean, look at, so we're talking about, it all depends on your business. Look at a university. A university has 10, 12, 15 different personas. They've
Very
got
good.
students and parents and stakeholders and teachers. And I mean, you go on and on. So you have to pick and choose your battles. And that's why we get to, you can't have content for everything because you won't hit the mark on anything. So pick a couple things. So you might say, oh, this is the content plan for this group of people because we want to target them and we want them to do these three things. I think of Andrew Davis's letters to Warren Buffett is a really great example of this. Andrew Davis had a goal and he wanted to meet Warren Buffett. And he sent a letter a week to Warren Buffett so he could meet. And he's a target of one. That was just that strategy. And it worked. He ended up meeting Warren Buffett. So we can do these things. So if your goal is, hey, we have these 25 influencers that we want them to share our stuff or whatever the case is, or we want them to come into our restaurant or what, I don't know what it is. Well, you should have a program just to those 25. When I used to work at Penton Media in 2003, I think this was, we had one of the companies that hired us, they did a book program for a couple of years, sending executive books to 150 people. That was it. It was only 150. And every month we would send them a book package and like a little synopsis of the book and whatever. Well, why do that? Those 150 people had multiple millions of dollars of buying power. Really important group for them. So that's where I just, who's the audience? What's the goal? What do you want them to do? This is all marketing. So you might want to choose your battle. So you might have an influencer plan and maybe 2 content marketing plans for 2 audiences. And you're going to see how those go and adapt from there.
How do we differentiate a newsletter and an email marketing strategy? Is newsletter part of an email marketing strategy?
It absolutely should be and could be, depending on how your organization is set up. But yeah, so if you have a total marketing strategy and then you have this thing called email that you're going to use, there are lots of things we use email for. We use email for our customer communication. So you have a strategy around that. Before they buy, after they buy, maybe you've got a loyalty program. Maybe that is your e-newsletter. We don't know those things. So yeah, you do want to look at it holistically. So if you're on the content marketing team and you're not talking to the email folks, there's a problem, which is historically what's been the problem for content marketing folks, because they generally put them on an island, but they have to integrate with you have to integrate it with advertising. You have to integrate it with social media. You have to integrate it with PR and comm. So it's a little bit all over the place. So yes, I would like that to happen. Could you just say, hey, we're creating a separate media brand inside this organization. You're creating an e-newsletter of prospects. Here's that persona that we're looking for. And we want you to ultimately, that will be a lead generation vehicle for new products. You could, and that could be completely separate from your email marketing strategy. Just say, you're just creating a new asset. That's the easiest way to do it. Arrow Electronics is a really good example. When you look at, they have 50 or 52, we talk about it in the book, media brands, if you will. Each one of them has a newsletter. Now, are those connected to the way Arrow sends their emails out to customers? Nope, not at all, because it would get way too complicated. Their goal is they're trying to educate and then move people from not buying any Arrow products to buying Arrow products. And then they get both. They're on the e-newsletter and then they're in this whole marketing automation system as well. So I would like, in a small company, I'd like you to all talk to each other. Hopefully you are. So it can be together, but it also can be separate. Well, Andy is always right. And I would, but it's not all digital. You have events. You have, I don't know about whatever podcasts fit in this whole thing. That's very important. Print magazines are still, I still get Lego magazine. I'm a Lego. Come on. I've been getting Lego magazine since I was 14 years old.
Okay.
So these things work really well. And I actually change and maintain or change my behavior based on those. So it's not just digital. Now, your second question is, where, as a small business, where do I put my budget? So you can do, so what was this? SEO, social media, and email. The three important. You could knock out all three of those different types of goals or things, ways that you want to generate interest or people finding you through one program. And that's, I'm always in it to simplify, because you can get so complicated when you're doing this. So if you have one audience, you're like, okay, we're going to create a program we're a food distribution company and we target restaurants. So we're going to create a content brand around that, to an educational portal, which has an email newsletter component. And then, of course, you have a social media plan because you want people to sign up for your email newsletter. And if you do that really well, and you focus on your keywords, which you probably should, if you're looking at the editorial plan for that email newsletter, you're going to have some opportunities in SEO. So you knock out all three of those with one very simple plan, as long as you're thinking about it. And that's why, Brian's got a great chapter on content optimization. We talk about SEO as part of people finding you and discovery. So you don't have to, it doesn't have to all be separate things. It can be one thing, but you have to think about it first. So that's what I agree with Andy but you could do that as well. You could say, hey, well, this is what we tried to do with Creator Economy Expo. There's all kinds of content creator online events, and there's some big creator like the Mr. Beast of the word creator events. But what about the creator events for the regular content creator, solopreneur that wants to build a business? There's no events out there for that, in-person events. So we said, okay, that's our differentiation area. We can go out and create that in-person event. So just depends on how you're thinking about it.
I was linking to this question, your previous book, where you said you need an email offering. Whatever you do in content, whatever good is your SEO whatsoever, you do need an email offering at some point. So that was the link to my question.
Yeah, and I would second that. I don't want to force the issue. Like if somebody believes that their preferred platform for this thing, this plan to work is YouTube, great. Do the YouTube thing. But again, when we talk about rented land and not having control over those subscribers or followers, ultimately, I would like to see some kind of sign up where you get them into an addressable audience that you can control the distribution outside of the social media network. So that's why it's more important, I believe, than ever before. And a lot of us marketers have been dealt a bad hand, if you will, force that says we only need to be on social media, which is horrible. And a lot of companies still do that. And when those companies change the rules, as they always do, then here we are holding the bag and we're like, okay, we don't have anything. We have no assets. So use that social media to leverage. And at the end of the day, if they all go by the wayside or you're banned from every one of them, you have something that's an asset. Well, community, everybody's talking about community, right?
That's
basically a community is an audience that's taking action and wants to be more a part of what you're doing. So how do you get there? The first thing is you have to build an audience, and you create that basically value exchange in some way. I'm going to send you this content. You're going to give me this data, and we have that relationship. We're like cousins, if you will. And then you're like, okay, well, how do you get them a little bit more involved? I want a brother or a sister type relationship, if you will. And I want you to really love what we're doing. How do you move them into community? You have to give them those opportunities. Kevin Kelly's 1,000 True Fans comes into mind, into that. Then you move into, okay, we've got this brother or sister. I want this. This is the person that is going to go to the mat for me no matter what. They're the first to support me, the first to talk about me on social media, generally, probably not a brother or sister, probably a parent of some kind, but best friend, if you will. That's your super fans. And that's where you have to create, I think you should create, and hopefully we did that with our Epic Content book launch that you know very well, where we got some people involved that wanted to take a little bit extra, that was so liked what we were doing and wanted to support us, and they wanted to be part. So create that program for your super fans. And we talk about the idea of Web3 and tokenization and how you can take a little bit of that and of what you have as a content creator and slice something off from an ownership standpoint, I don't want to get into that here. That's really where you can activate super fans. I think that'll happen in the next 3 to 5 years. We're probably a little bit too early, even though we've got some test cases going on for our business. But I think that's where we're moving. You could find, it's almost like when I worked on that program 20 years ago, where you had the 150 people that had the big, if you have, do you have 50 or 100 or 150 people that want to be part of your marketing department? Well, let them, give them access, but give them something special at the same time. Is that a private community? Is that a special email that nobody gets to? Is that you're going to send them all to Punta Cana? And yes, those types of things. Disney does this really great with Disney Moms. They have their Disney Moms program. The Disney Mom, you know, they've been doing that for years. But if we think about those things, you have a group of people that also have a voice, that also have an audience. They want to be part of your marketing department, and please let them. But you have to create those opportunities. So basically, we look at Web 2. Web 2 is where we're creating all this content on other people's platforms. That was the rise of social media. Everyone could do this thing, and we're not creating a lot of asset value from the creator standpoint. All the value was created for these big companies like LinkedIn, Microsoft, and Facebook, and Instagram, and the whole thing. So they got all the power. So we're like, is there a power shift possibility? And that's where we get into Web 3. So from our, so I'll give you an example about Creator Economy Expo. So we created an event, Creator Economy Expo. And I was like, how can we slice off a bit of this value and create something that's so incredibly valuable for attendees? And I thought, okay, well, let's look at the process. The process of going to an event. I buy a ticket to any event, but in this case, CEX. And once that event's over, I might get the videos, but I paid my $795 and it's gone. Hopefully I got my value out of it. And if I didn't, I can't do anything about it. And I'm like, oh, that's terrible. It's like, what if they invest a little bit more and they get value ongoing? And that's why we created our never ending ticket. It was an NFT. It's all, so we created 100 tokens, and each of them are unique. And you could buy one at about twice and sometimes 3 times the amount of a regular ticket, and you get a never ending ticket. And so you get to go every year. And I'm like, oh, this is fantastic. Sort of built a little bit off of what Gary Vaynerchuk did with his VFriends program. And I said, well, how do we make this even more valuable? I said, well, let's create a private community and we'll do projects together. So that's where we are now. So we've got 70 people in this private community. They get never ending ticket access, and their investment lives on. And here's where the Web3 comes in from an ownership standpoint. Yes. So now they're part of this whole thing. But let's say that you're in that and you're like, I'm changing careers. I'm not in content creation anymore. I want to leave. You could go and sell it to somebody else. So you, whether for the same or more or less, I don't know. So you have that opportunity, and that's where I love. And the fans, super fans, can have ownership of something that the creator is doing, but also have the freedom to say, yes, I will use this, or no, I'm going to sell it. It's so interesting. And this is just so first level. The reason why it's in a content marketing book is you have to do the content marketing plan to get to the end where you're doing this for super fans, because you have, how do you build the super fans? Then how do you create value for the super fans? And that's where your NFTs come in.
Awesome connection. I loved it very much. Two very, very quickly last questions. NFTs, and I remember an episode of This Old Marketing where you were for the first time saying that Seth Godin was so wrong, was one of his posts about NFTs like Pokemon and dangerous and things. What are your thoughts now, today, in March 2023, about all this, with all the distance and the...
I'm still bullish on tokenization, which includes social tokens and NFTs. I believe that we are in a very experimental mode, and we just happen to be in a horrible bear market when it comes to tokens. Specifically, there's no regulation. Everybody's got to figure out the regulation of them, especially in the US, and it hasn't been done yet. I'm hopeful when that's done and everyone knows the playing field, that creators will be able to create these things and not have to worry. And people can buy these things and not have to worry. Superfans can buy. So I am still bullish. And anybody that puts out there that, oh, this is silly or this is not and this is crazy, that's fine. They all can have their opinions, but I think it's short-sighted because we don't know. This is a technology that it's been around for like whatever it is, 20 years, I mean, almost 20 years, but we're just starting to test out cases. And this is how things can work. So in 2020, it just, it's been around since 15, 17, CryptoPunks took off. 20 and 21 was this bull, and then everything fell off a cliff because of a lot of different things. Now, nothing has really changed. You can still do all the things between creator and an audience. So I would just say, don't say that I would never be the one to say that's never going to work. I'm not that kind of person, because anything can work. There's a better way and a not better way. But I really do believe that you're going to see NFTs in anything. You're going to see people that have a luxury watch is going to have an NFT. If you have a luxury boat, you're going to need a digital certificate somewhere where people can say, when did you buy it? And real estate is all going to go this direction.
For sure.
I think. So we've cracked it. The first case studies with the creator community, and they've taken a brunt of a lot of the hate around it. But I think that the best times are yet to come. $15,000. I would buy a website. I would create a WordPress site, if you will, that has the content brand. And I would create an email newsletter that's very targeted to a specific audience. And I would probably do I don't know if it'd be maybe start weekly and then go more frequent from there, but I would start a weekly newsletter and multiple pieces of content on the website and focus on one social platform with that. Depending on your audience. So that could be, if it's business audience, go LinkedIn. If it's a consumer audience, maybe you're going Instagram, whatever, but or Twitter, I don't know, it depends. But I would focus on that. And I think that is the kind of cost scenario that with $15,000 you could launch all of those things and maybe have a little bit left over, and then focus the rest on, content promotion or maybe some ads promoting that, and then go. It's very 18, 24 months. You'll have it. I believe.